The studio lights were sharper than usual. Piers Morgan adjusted his tie as the countdown in his earpiece ticked down from 10. The screens behind him pulsed with bold red and white graphics, Piers Uncensored, live debate special. This wasn't going to be a friendly chat. It wasn't meant to be. And across from him sat Karoline Leavitt, unmoved, almost statuesque. Dressed in a sharp white blazer, her posture upright, eyes locked forward. Her mic was already clipped in. No small talk. No warm-up. He leaned forward, his tone mock casual. Karoline, let's begin with the obvious, your party's obsession with the word freedom. Isn't that just a cover for avoiding responsibility? Karoline didn't blink. Freedom, she said slowly, isn't a marketing term. It's a promise. One that people like you keep trying to water down with lectures and headlines. The energy shifted. The control room, behind glass, fell into a tense silence. Piers grinned, too wide. I didn't bring you here to repeat talking points. If you want fireworks, give us something real. Karoline leaned forward, finally. You want fireworks? She echoed, voice low and razor-edged. You got it. And that's when it happened. The air grew thick with unspoken history, political spin, media arrogance, culture war fatigue. Karoline didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She began listing off facts, one by one. Past interviews, shifting positions, public hypocrisies. And not hers, his. You mock Americans for what you think they believe, she said. But maybe it's easier to laugh than to admit you don't understand them at all. He tried to interrupt, but she held the floor. Calm, composed, lethal. By the 2-minute mark, the show had veered off its rails, and viewers across the country were already clipping it, sharing it, reposting it with captions like, "She ended him," and "Not your average interview." But Karoline wasn't done. Not even close. The control room was scrambling. Producers whispered frantically into headsets. One camera operator mouthed, "Should we cut?" but no one answered. Ratings were spiking. Viewers weren't tuning out, they were tuning in. And they weren't blinking. On screen, Karoline Leavitt didn't flinch as Piers Morgan regained his footing. "So let me get this straight," he said, his voice tight. "You're suggesting I'm the problem? That media scrutiny is the reason your side can't handle accountability?" Karoline gave a half-smile. "I'm saying when the media becomes the activist, truth becomes a casualty." A pause. Just long enough to let it sting. Piers straightened in his chair. That's rich coming from someone who parrots party lines and weaponizes outrage for clicks. Karoline's expression didn't change. "The difference is, I don't pretend to be neutral. You do." Gasps echoed faintly from off-camera crew. It wasn't just what she said, it was how. Calm, measured, precise. The kind of delivery that hits harder than yelling ever could. Piers shifted tactics. He pulled out a printed quote. "Here's what you said last year, we're done playing nice with people who hate this country." That's not debate. That's division. Karoline leaned in. "You're right. It is division. But I'm not the one who started it, I'm the one refusing to pretend it doesn't exist. Pretending we're all on the same page when half the room is trying to burn the book isn't unity. It's delusion." The live chat beneath the stream exploded. Emojis. All caps messages. "This is insane. She's cooking." Piers looking shook. Behind the scenes, producers were already prepping a delay buffer, but it was too late. The moment had escaped the cage. And Piers, ever the showman, knew it. He forced a chuckle. "You do love a fight, don't you?" Karoline's eyes narrowed. "No. But I don't run from one when it matters." The segment cut to commercial, but the damage, or the magic, was already done. Twitter was flooding. YouTube reaction videos were going up mid-broadcast. It was no longer just a debate. It was a cultural flashpoint. And Karoline Leavitt had just lit the fuse. The break ended, but no one was breathing easier. As the show returned from commercial, the producers opted for a tighter camera angle, trying to contain the fire on screen. But it was too late. The air between Karoline Leavitt and Piers Morgan was already thick with voltage. Piers leaned back, putting on his trademark smirk. "You speak with such conviction, Karoline. Almost as if your version of truth is immune to contradiction." Karoline didn't look away. "Truth doesn't fear contradiction. But distraction, that's your weapon." He raised an eyebrow. "Is that what you think this is? A distraction?" She nodded. "You've spent years turning political discourse into late-night entertainment. You invite people on to debate, then interrupt them with pre-written punchlines." That hit home. For a split second, the smirk cracked. But Piers wasn't finished. "So what? You want us all to be angry robots reciting policy memos? This is television. People want personality. They want passion." Karoline folded her arms. "Then give them real passion, not mockery in a blazer." Twitter immediately grabbed that line. "Mockery in a blazer" was trending within minutes. Piers dug in. "You're not here to argue. You're here to perform, just like everyone else." Karoline tilted her head. "Then consider this my opening act, because I'm just getting started." And she did. She brought up examples, clips from previous interviews, statistics on biased coverage, and headlines spun to suit narratives. She exposed patterns, not just moments. It wasn't rage, it was dissection. And Piers? He couldn't stop it. Not with charm. Not with condescension. Not with misdirection. He tried one last pivot. "You always seem so sure of yourself. No room for doubt?" Karoline answered without hesitation. "Doubt is useful. But surrendering truth for politeness isn't doubt, it's cowardice." There it was. The studio fell silent again. Even Piers didn't have a retort ready. In the social feed, people weren't just watching, they were choosing sides. Hashtag Levit Uncensored was rising fast. So was hashtag Piers Under Fire. One side saw her as bold. The other called her combative. But no one could say she didn't show up prepared to fight. And it was only halfway through the hour. Piers exhaled slowly. This wasn't the interview he thought it would be. It was supposed to be a sparring match, some headlines, a viral clip, and a polite goodbye. But Karoline had come with something else, a scalpel, not a hammer. And now, every cut was precise. "So," he said, reaching for higher ground, "you've talked a lot about truth. But what happens when your truth alienates half the country?" Karoline didn't blink. "Then maybe half the country needs to stop mistaking comfort for correctness." He smirked again. "You do love drawing lines, don't you?" "I don't draw them," she said calmly. "I just stop pretending they aren't already there." The air tensed again. This wasn't just political theater anymore. It had slipped into something more raw, more elemental. Karoline turned slightly, addressing the camera now. "People are tired of being told that if they think differently, they must be wrong, or worse, evil. You ask about alienation, Piers? Maybe the media should ask itself what it's done to fuel it." In the control room, the segment producer mouthed, "Oh my God." Back on set, Piers tried to reassert control. "You talk about the media like it's some monolith. But here you are, on one of the biggest platforms in the world. Isn't that a contradiction?" Karoline raised an eyebrow. "No. It's a correction." Boom. The room behind the glass erupted with tension again. Assistants were texting their bosses. Commentators were clearing their schedules. Reaction pieces were already being outlined by political blogs before the show had even ended. Piers leaned in, trying to level the field. "You say all this with confidence. But you've never run a show. You've never had to hold the mic while the world throws stones at you. It's harder than it looks." Karoline didn't hesitate. "And maybe if you spent less time performing for applause and more time listening, you wouldn't need to dodge stones at all." For a moment, it was just the hum of studio lights. Then Piers said something rare, something almost human. "You really don't care if people like you, do you?" Karoline's eyes didn't waver. "No, I care if they hear me." It was the kind of line that didn't just echo in the room, it echoed in the audience. In a political era drowning in noise, she had cut straight through. And somewhere deep in Piers's expression, for just a second, there was something that looked like respect. Just a flicker, but real. The next question wasn't on the card. Piers adjusted the stack of notes in front of him, but none of them mattered anymore. The segment had officially gone rogue, and America was watching. Not with half an eye while cooking dinner. With full attention. Screenshots, reaction threads, and TikToks were already spiraling into virality. He cleared his throat. "Let's talk about celebrity activism," he said. "Since you seem so comfortable calling out hypocrisy." Karoline crossed one leg over the other, unbothered. "Go on." Piers tapped his notes, eyes narrowing. "You've slammed actors, musicians, tech giants, but don't you see the irony? You're becoming a celebrity yourself. A media star. Isn't that the same machine you're criticizing?" Karoline smiled. But not kindly. "There's a difference," she replied. "They use fame to sell fiction. I use visibility to speak truth. One performs for applause. The other risks getting booed for what matters." Piers leaned forward. "So what, everyone with a platform should shut up unless they agree with you?" "No," Karoline said sharply. "They should just stop pretending they're above the consequences of what they preach." The control room producer whispered into the headset, "This is nuclear." Piers wasn't done. "You criticize people for speaking up, but at least they're trying to change something." "Are they?" she fired back. "Or are they just cashing in on causes they barely understand? You ever notice how their activism stops where their endorsement deals begin?" Boom. The comments section lit up like a Christmas tree. Clips of her words were already being repackaged with dramatic music, zoom edits, and titles like, "She Said What?" Piers sat back, searching for a crack, a misstep, but Karoline wasn't unraveling. She was growing stronger, feeding off every counter. He tried one last angle. "People say you're divisive, that you create conflict where we need unity." Karoline didn't blink. "Unity without honesty is just silence with nicer branding." Silence fell over the room again. No witty comeback. No clever pivot. Just the weight of words. In that moment, it became clear, Piers had invited a firestorm, and she walked in holding the match. Behind the scenes, execs were already drafting statements. Sponsors were watching closely. Every frame of this broadcast would be dissected by morning. And Karoline? She wasn't done. Not yet. The air had shifted. Even Piers Morgan, veteran of thousands of interviews, felt it. Not the familiar tension of disagreement, but something rarer, the unmistakable gravity of being outmatched, not in volume, but in conviction. And the audience felt it too. Viewers weren't just watching anymore, they were bracing themselves. Because every time Piers reached for the steering wheel, Karoline took the wheel right back, and drove straight through his carefully curated roadblocks. "So," he said, trying once again to reshape the battlefield, "you say celebrities should stay in their lane. Politicians too. But what happens when you're both?" Karoline's response was instant. "Then the responsibility doubles, not dissolves." "Interesting," Piers murmured. "And who holds you accountable? The media, the people? Or just your own echo chamber?" Karoline leaned forward, her tone dropping low. "Controlled. Surgical. See, that's the trick," she said. "The media stopped holding people accountable the moment it decided who was allowed to be wrong." He tried to interrupt, but she didn't pause. "You forgive those who align with you. And you crucify those who challenge your worldview. That's not journalism, Piers. That's tribalism in a tailored suit." The impact hit harder than any shout ever could. Piers blinked. Karoline continued. "You asked who holds me accountable? The answer is simple, the truth. And whether you like me or not, that doesn't change what's real." The silence was so tight it was almost physical. Across the internet, commentary channels were already reacting in real time. One popular streamer had paused the show mid-sentence just to say, "This woman came to brawl." He brought a microphone, she brought receipts. Piers finally broke the silence. "You seem very proud of pushing buttons." "I'm proud of not backing down," she said calmly. "Especially when powerful people get nervous just because I speak clearly." His voice sharpened. "And what exactly makes you think you're different from the rest?" "From me?" Karoline gave a half-smile. "Because I don't confuse controversy with courage. I say what I mean, and I stand in it. Whether people cheer or boo." There was no applause sign in the studio. But if there had been, every hand in the country would have already been raised. Piers stared at her for a long second, measuring her. Then, with the faintest trace of admiration wrapped in frustration, he muttered into the mic, "Well, this certainly wasn't boring." Karoline didn't smile. It wasn't supposed to be. By now, the tone of the broadcast had completely changed. This wasn't an interview. It wasn't a debate. It was a reckoning. And Karoline Leavitt had become something more than a guest, she was a mirror. One that Piers, and many watching at home, were struggling to look into. "I'll ask you one last time," Piers said, his voice quieter now, almost measured. "Do you believe America is more divided because of the media, or because of politicians like you?" Karoline's answer was swift. "No. It's more divided because no one's willing to tell the truth unless it helps their side win." Piers tilted his head. "So what's your truth then?" She turned to the camera again. "That the world doesn't need more celebrities pretending to be leaders. It needs leaders who aren't afraid to get booed. Who won't change their tone to fit a trending hashtag." "And that's you?" he challenged. "I'm not saying I'm perfect," Karoline said. "I'm saying I show up. I don't hide behind scripts or handlers or focus groups. You might not like how I say things, but you'll always know where I stand." The chat feed on multiple live streams was moving too fast to read now. Hashtags like #LevitUnfiltered, #PiersOutmatched, and #TruthOnAir were trending across multiple platforms. Even political opponents were grudgingly admitting, this wasn't just a media moment, it was a cultural shift. Piers, sensing the wave, tried to ride it. "You know this will go viral. You know you just won the internet." Karoline glanced at him. "I didn't come here to win the internet. I came here to stop people like you from thinking they already have." That line would end up on 1,000 thumbnails by morning. He leaned back, defeated but composed. "So what now?" Karoline stood up, not with bravado, but with presence. "Now," she said, straightening her white blazer. "Now people get to choose. Not just between left and right. But between real and rehearsed." Piers nodded slowly, the corners of his mouth tightening. "I'll give you this, you came to play." She walked toward the exit of the set, microphone still live. "No, Piers. I came to end the game." And with that, she disappeared off screen. The camera cut back to Piers, who for the first time that night, had nothing to say. Not even a closing joke. Just silence. The clip hit 5 million views in under an hour. Karoline hadn't even returned to her hotel when she saw the first wave crash. Headlines, TikToks, reaction montages, even AI-generated reenactments of the exchange. Piers Morgan's face was frozen mid-reaction across hundreds of thumbnails, each more dramatic than the last. She didn't flinch. Because this wasn't just viral, it was calculated. Inside the media world, chaos bloomed. Producers scrambled to book Karoline for follow-up interviews. Analysts rushed to interpret every line. Cable news hosts rewrote their intros for the night. For once, both the left and the right weren't just responding, they were reacting. And reacting hard. CNN labeled it, an unfiltered flashpoint. Fox News, Karoline shuts down the circus. But the most shared headline of all came from a political Substack. She ended the interview. And maybe the illusion with it. Backstage at Piers Morgan Uncensored, the mood was mixed. Some were stunned. Others were angry. But one producer, half grinning as she stared at the overnight trending data, just whispered. She gave us exactly what we asked for. Just not the way we thought. Meanwhile, on college campuses, political forums, and in suburban living rooms, people weren't just watching, they were choosing sides. Not red or blue, but real versus polished. People who say what's expected, and people who don't care if you flinch. And in the midst of that divide, Karoline Leavitt became something unexpected. Not a politician. Not a pundit. But a disruption. Piers, ever the media veteran, eventually offered a post-show tweet. Spirited debate with Karoline Leavitt tonight. We didn't agree, but damn, it was honest. Respect. The replies? A war zone of praise, scorn, memes, and memes of memes. Some called Karoline brave. Others called her reckless. But nobody called her boring. That was the point. Because in an age where most interviews blurred into background noise, she had turned one into a line in the sand. And the public? They weren't just watching anymore. They were listening. By the next morning, the media wasn't reporting on the interview anymore. They were reporting on the fallout. Newsrooms debated if Piers Morgan had lost control of his own platform, or if he had unknowingly launched the next conservative media icon. Opinion columns from both sides flooded the internet. One scathing piece in The Guardian declared, Levitt's performance wasn't politics. It was performance art wrapped in fire. Others weren't so critical. A podcast titled The Post-Truth Arena opened with, Say what you will about Karoline Leavitt, but last night, she didn't flinch, didn't stutter, and didn't care if you liked her. That's not common anymore. That's newsworthy. Even Saturday Night Live threw together a last-minute cold open, with a Karoline impersonator shouting, I came for truth, and you handed me British sarcasm on a silver spoon. The laughter didn't land. Not because it wasn't funny. But because the moment had become bigger than parody. On Capitol Hill, political insiders started murmuring. She's building something, one staffer texted another. You don't go toe-to-toe with Piers and walk out the front door unless you've got plans. And Karoline? She kept walking. She released no press statement, gave no apology, and declined the flood of follow-up invites, except one, a solo live stream titled simply, Unfiltered. Hundreds of thousands tuned in. There was no flashy set. No makeup artist. Just her, seated, blazer buttoned, voice calm. Last night wasn't about right versus left, she began. It was about whether truth still matters when the cameras are rolling. She didn't repeat the viral lines. She didn't gloat. She just clarified. I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to speak. Loud enough to be heard above the noise. The comments section exploded. Again. People didn't always agree, but they leaned in. Because in a media landscape full of spin, they had found something raw. Something disruptive. Something alive. And as the stream ended, her final words hovered in the air. If the truth burns bridges, light the match. Weeks passed. The headlines faded, the memes slowed, and the frenzy calmed. But something had shifted, permanently. Karoline Leavitt wasn't just trending anymore. She was etched into the conversation. Not because she'd shouted the loudest, but because she'd said what many were afraid to say, with clarity, control, and consequences. Networks rewatched the clip frame by frame. Think tanks held panels dissecting the confrontation. Her name was written into fundraising emails, campaign ads, college classroom debates. The left saw her as a growing threat. The right saw her as a new kind of soldier. But the people? They were still talking. At a diner in Pennsylvania, a waitress poured coffee for a couple arguing over the interview. In a barbershop in Chicago, a client asked to play the Levitt Morgan moment on the TV while waiting. In a newsroom in D.C., a young journalist whispered to a colleague, "She just said what everyone else rehearses." And then came the invitation. A major network, one that previously wouldn't have touched her without framing her, offered a guest hosting spot. Prime time. Live. Unedited. She didn't hesitate. The night arrived. No teleprompter. Just a chair, a camera, and her voice. Karoline looked straight down the lens. "You've heard enough noise," she began. "Tonight, you'll hear something else, direction." She didn't just rehash old talking points. She dissected policies. Challenged assumptions. She didn't soften. But she didn't scream either. And by the end of the hour, the network's live viewer count broke internal records. Not because she pandered. Because she meant it. After the show, she stood alone in the studio, lights dimming around her, producers buzzing in the background. One assistant hesitated, then asked, "How did you stay so calm on Piers' show? You knew the setup." Karoline turned slightly, her expression unshaken. "I didn't need the setup to win. I just needed the mic." And that became the legacy of the moment. Not a viral clip. Not a dramatic headline. But the emergence of a voice that refused to ask permission. A voice that walked into a fire and left with the smoke behind her. Because Karoline Leavitt didn't play the media game. She rewrote the rules. And there you have it. One studio. Two voices. And a moment that couldn't be ignored. Karoline Leavitt didn't just survive the fire, she brought her own. In a world where image often trumps impact, she reminded everyone what it looks like to show up, speak up, and burn through the noise without flinching. Whether you agree with her or not, one thing is now crystal clear. She doesn't wait for permission. She doesn't follow the script. And when the lights come on, she owns the room. This wasn't just a media clash. It was a warning shot. To every anchor who thinks they're untouchable. To every voice that hides behind the safety of sarcasm. To every system that still underestimates conviction. You asked for fireworks? You got it. And this fire isn't going out anytime soon.